This is Pet Life Radio. Let's talk pets.
Welcome to the Human Animal Connection Show, where we believe we can communicate with all animals. Join us as we explore the 33 principles and healing methods of the human animal connection. As animal lovers, we know that you share our commitment to making the world a kinder place for all creatures. Together, let's embrace the transformative healing power of the human animal connection.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Human Animal Connection Show. I am your host. Happy to be here, Michael Overly, and I'm with the amazing, smiling, and happy Jeannie Joseph. Jeannie, yay!
Yay! Happy to be here. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to the Human Animal Connection Show. And this episode is about the power of names and how important it is, because the spirit of a being is carried in the name. So we're going to talk about naming animals. Those of us who share our lives with animals, we often are in the position of giving a name, or sometimes we have an animal's come to us already with a name, and we need to just ask and see, is this the right name, the best name for this animal? And it doesn't mean that there's like some good names and bad names. It means, what is the name that best expresses the spirit of the animal? So, for example, the name Bill might be perfect for one animal, but not perfect for the next animal. So it's not about whether the name is good or bad. It's about whether or not the name expresses the spirit of the energy of the animal and allows that animal to express their spirit more fully.
So, Dana and I were in Wyoming a couple weekends ago, and there was a guy there. He had a Belgian Malinois and like a border collie, and I don't know if I can say the names on here, but or the nicknames. One was Loco, and the other was Hole.
Oh,
and I was like, what is the energy behind that you would call your dogs that?
Yeah,
it was
because
really
then you're using that word every day, however many times a day it's just really an important question to say, does my dog have the name that is the best fit for their development? And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some stories of some people and some clients. So we're going to really take a look in this episode at what the effect is of a name and whether or not the name supports the animal and supports the relationship between the human and animal. Is this a name that allows the animal to express their true nature and to grow and express themselves? Or is this a name, a burden, or an undignified name, or whatever? And, sometimes like in the shelter situation, dogs come in that are strays and the name is not known. And we have 100 dogs a day coming into the shelter, and somebody's going to very quickly slap a name on a dog to get them into the process, to get them through adoption. But that person is going to just randomly kind of pick a name. I mean, sometimes they'll make a good choice, but sometimes not. And I've noticed that dogs with a name that doesn't suit them are harder to adopt. They don't get adopted as quickly as a dog that has a name that suits them. And every name is good. It's just a question of, is the right name for that dog? So we were talking in the last episode about a big old tank-sized pit bull with the name Dante, and it wasn't the best name for him, and it didn't help him get adopted. And I've seen very gentle dogs and, with the wrong names and just the wrong archetype sometimes. It's a gentle dog with a tough name, or a tough name it just is all a mess. It's a mess. And dogs can learn a new name. So if you adopt a dog from a rescue or a shelter and it doesn't feel like the right name to you, I mean, sometimes my clients will ask me. I never ask, say, hey, this is the wrong name. It's just if they say to me, hey, they know my work and they know that I do this. So if they ask and they say, is this the right name? I'll ask the dog and say, how do you feel about your name? And I'd say 85% of the time, with a person who's chosen fairly well, they're happy. But about 15% of the time, they say there's a better name. And so I only mention this when people ask, because it's a very sensitive topic. And a lot of people are not willing to consider that they've given their dog a name that isn't really serving their soul. But sometimes people really want to do what's best, and they really want to know. So I had one client with 2 dogs, and the kids had named one dog Frank and the other dog Beans, right? And Beans was, when I asked, was perfectly happy being called Beans. It didn't bother Beans one bit. But Frank said, that's not my name. sometimes people are willing to hear that, and we really listen, and we do it. It's not a simple thing. I listen sometimes for a couple of weeks to make sure that it's the right name. Like when Lulu came to us, her shelter name was Canella. We're still fostering her. But Canella didn't do anything for her, didn't support her, didn't express her spirit. But Lulu brings out her playfulness and brings out her tenderness in a way that Canella didn't. Canella, it's not that it's a bad name in any way. It's just that it did nothing for her. It didn't help her to grow into her true nature. And yesterday we took her out for the very first time to a pet grooming place, and they were very nice. I said, look, this is a really scared dog. I don't think she can do anything yet. Can I just bring her in and let her experience the place, And it was the first time introducing her to public as, this is Lulu. And she acted like Lulu. She pranced around and played and was polite to everybody and made friends with at least the women. A man came in and she turned into Godzilla. But, it was really great to see her prancing around as Lulu. I got her a little tag. It says Lulu, a little pink heart, it says Lulu. And it's really good for her. So it's not that Lulu would be right for every dog, but I really listened. It took a couple of weeks and I went through a couple of names. And at first I thought it was Angel, and it wasn't Angel. And I forgot the names I went through, but finally it was Lulu. Oh, Luna was one of the names we were looking at, but Lulu was the name that just seemed to kind of capture her spirit and allow her to express it. And it's interesting because in the Hawaiian tradition, they don't name the baby when it's first born. They wait till the baby's first birthday, a year. And that's when they have the baby luau, which is the naming ceremony. And at 1 year old, the baby formally gets their name. And this is something that's not done frivolously. Like sometimes the grandparents will have a dream and hear the name, or the mother before she gives birth will hear the name, or a family member. But it's a very reverent process to name a being. And that's why sometimes in Hawaiian, you have these very long names. You can have nicknames, but sometimes the ancestors or the Amakua, which is a guardian animal, will be in the name. So different things, because the name is what carries what in Hawaiian the word is mana, which is like their spirit or their chi. In Chinese would be chi, or Japanese would say ki. It's the life force, it's the essence that carries their spirit. And so when you have the right name, their mana is supported. It's respected, because every day I call upon that energy. I had a cat named Serafina. When I adopted her from the shelter, her name was Fluffy. What? Fluffy? Just didn't do anything. It's not that it's a terrible name or anything. I mean, some cats would do very well with Fluffy, but she was not a Fluffy. She was a refined being, and she needed a name that expressed that. And she became a very fine therapy cat after being a very traumatized cat that spent 6 weeks under the bed when I first brought her home. I never saw her for 6 weeks. I just changed the cat box and fed her and didn't see her for 6 weeks, and it was 6 months before I could pet her. So she had a long journey, but giving her the name Serafina was one of the things that helped really allow her to grow and change into that. And my friend Afton, who has a wonderful horse sanctuary where he takes horses that are like headed for the glue factory, Mustangs that can't be ridden and whatever, just terrible. And so he has a place called Wild Horse Haven Rescue. And he had one horse that his son had named Rowdy. And this horse lived up to his name. He would pick fights with all the other horses. Nothing would be wrong. And he'd just go pick a fight. He'd just go rattle up the herd. It was like, I had a friend who used to call it out, let me go start some fires. Like some people say, let me go put out some fires. She'd say, let me start some fires. She just wanted to get some energy going. So Rowdy would be doing this. And I explained to him about names, and he thought about it. And he decided to rename this horse, and he called him Aries for the god of, the god of war. It was just a more elegant name. And he changed this horse's name to Aries. And as soon as he did, the behavior changed. He would call Aries, and the horse would kind of lift his head and feel kind of proud. And the other horses, he started behaving differently. The other horses saw him differently. Everything changed in his behavior. And he was thinking, I don't know if I can keep this horse, was disturbing the herd, but just the name change changed the dynamic between them. And I have one more story to tell you like that. So, well, probably more than one more, but one more that I don't want to forget. So this is a story from Anna Breitenbach, who's a wonderful animal communicator, and she doesn't work with pet animals. She works with wild animals, but she was working with a sanctuary that had a jaguar that they had. And this jaguar, everyone was terrified of him. And he was very, did a lot of displays of, stay away from me, and, a lot of aggression, just really tough guy, and didn't want to come out of he had a little enclosure that he could be in, and he didn't want to come out. And it was hard to clean and feed and do things. And his name was Diablo. And she went and talked with him. And among other things, Diablo explained was he did not want to be called Diablo. He wanted to be called Spirit. And they renamed him to Spirit, and everything changed. His behavior changed, which then changed how the humans related to him. So they started relating to him as Spirit, not as the devil, right? And this changed everything in the dynamics between him, and his life improved dramatically because people didn't see him as the devil anymore. And he didn't need to start behaving like, he didn't need to continue to behave in devilish ways. He could begin to express his true energy, his true spirit. So I've seen that a lot, so I have a lot of clients who I've helped, when they ask, change their name. It's about 10 or 15% of dogs that say, no, I don't like my name. I need another name.
Yeah. I had an experience with a horse. I would do some energy work on literally down the road. Old, 38 years old.
Yeah.
And her name was Penny. But it felt off to me. So I asked the woman, I said, what was her name before? She goes, oh, she used to be called Lady. Yeah. And so when I would address her as Penny, I would get nowhere.
Yeah.
So when I would call her Lady, she would she would just love it and soften and come right over. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I know. It's so wonderful. When I was volunteering at a horse sanctuary, I had the same experience, and I would ask each of the horses about their name. There was one horse who had gotten kicked out of 4 barns, right? Because he was too violent. I mean, I actually had a temporary restraining order against a horse, right? And his name was Fire. Right. And so I talked with him, and, you couldn't take his mask off. He was just really intense. But anyway, I began working with him. I said, what would you like to be called? And he said, I'd like to be called Sweet Fire. And so I called him Sweet Fire, and everything changed. I mean, we had just a lovely way. He was still very spirited. It's not like it's going to take away his spirit, but it took off the edge. He didn't have to pick fights just to pick them. He could express his sweetness in addition to his fire. So it's very powerful when you find the right name. It really changes, because it changes our perceptions, how we look at them, how we see them. I mean, if you name an animal like that story you told in the beginning with a curse word, it's like you're using that word all the time. It's just sad. It's just a sad thing, and people do things like that, and it's sad. It makes me sad.
Yeah. Well, it tickled me because it sounded funny, and I realized that energy of that is being given to that dog all the time,
which is, it's just not, we wouldn't want to be called that, so why would we call a being something that we wouldn't want to be called? And it just, words have power and names have power. So choosing the right name is a beautiful thing that a human can do for an animal, is to really take the time to listen and find the right names. And very few people do this. So I just invite people to consider. And if you love the name and the animal loves the name, by all means, keep it. But if you feel like maybe it isn't the right name, then listen and see, and try some experiments, because dogs can learn a new name in a week or 2. I mean, it does not take long. All you have to do is use it in a nice way consistently, and especially around food, calling them for food, for a treat, and boom, they learn it.
And it worked for me.
Yeah, right. And, it's interesting because we think of dogs or cats or domestic animals, birds, knowing their names. But a lot of the animals that we've, not myself, but that scientists have researched, find that animals know their names. Like there was this one sanctuary that had crocodiles. And in order to feed the crocodiles, they needed some order. So they gave them each names, and they would say, Sam, and Sam would come up and get his food. And then he would slink down, and the other crocodiles would just wait for their name, get their food, come up and get, and it created a lot of order just by giving them names. And we talk about this today like it's nothing, but when Jane Goodall began her research and she dared to name the chimpanzees, she was lambasted in the academic circles, because at that time they would only call it, not he or she, and they would not give them names. They were, R27 instead of having a name. And she gave them names. And that's one of the things that allowed her to go where no other man had gone before in terms of her connecting with the animals. But she paid a very high price in terms of the academic thinking at the time. And of course, once you name an animal, you see them as an individual. You're not likely going to want to hurt them or eat them like on a farm. If you name an animal, it's hard to eat them after you've given them a name. So it's a really powerful thing. And every species that's been studied, pigs learn their names, elephants learn their names, dolphins have a whistle that is their signature name. Parrotlets in Venezuela know their names by peeps. So it's not nothing, a name. So that's just something that we'll let people think about over the break, to think about whether or not you've got the best name for the animal who shares your life.
Awesome. We'll see you soon.
Hey friends, if you like what you're hearing and want to learn more, check out Dr. Joseph's book, The Human-Animal Connection, Deepening Relationships with Animals and Ourselves. Or visit the website, thehumananimalconnection.org, to book an online consultation. Thank you for loving animals. Now back to the show.
Let's Talk Pets on PetLifeRadio.com.
Hey folks, welcome back. Oh my God, the power of names. Now I want to call my mom and say, did you give me the right name?
Really? Yeah, well, a lot of people on the spiritual path go through a cycle where they'll find another name that expresses their spirit more, and maybe they change it legally or maybe they don't, but it's something you can ask that question for yourself. Is this name the name that best supports you? And whether or not you choose to decide to change it legally, just having people that love you call you by the name that you like or whatever, it's a worthy question, and not everybody needs to do it. Many people are fine with the name that they were given at birth, but some people realize that it isn't the best name for them. So it's just something to play with. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well, what about kids naming animals?
Yeah. And sometimes, I knew one little girl named her dog Peaches, and that was fine for that dog. But not all dogs want a silly little funny little name, and some do. It just depends on their spirit. If they're playful, happy, that every time you hear the name Peaches, it makes you happy, it's fine, it's good energy in the house, great. But if it's like Frank and Beans, where Beans liked his name, but Frank didn't, it really helps. This Frank was a very profound being. I think he was a human, because when he looked at you, you felt like you were looking at a human. And Frank just didn't do it. Frank just didn't convey who he was. So that's what happens sometimes. But yeah, well, we were talking about Carl Berg, who was a researcher in Venezuela, and he spent decades actually studying this one species of parrotlet, which is a small bird. And parrotlets are very interesting because they actually, he's proven that, because he's analyzed their sounds on a computer, they actually have conversations. I mean, not just they, like what you say determines what I say, it's really amazing what he's discovered about these little wild birds. And he discovered that each of them has a name. And it's really important because it's very dangerous. Like when the female has the babies and she's nesting, she's tucked under and can't see. She has to know when the husband comes home, he calls her by name, and she can then stick her head up. If she sticks her head up for the wrong guy, these little parrots do some nasty things. Should I tell you? They steal babies and they steal wives and sometimes kill them. So they can only pick their head up for the husband. So they have to recognize the call of their name and the call of their mate. This is in nature. In nature, animals have ways that they call each other by name. It's not necessarily a name, not necessarily a sound we can hear. You know what I mean? It's not that, but they have a way that they can indicate, I'm talking to you, dolphin. You know what I mean? Not you, pelican. So they need to do that. And it's funny because cats sometimes will pretend like they don't know their name. There was this one guy, this is in my book, you tell this story, and he was like what he calls a foster fail, meaning he would foster cats and just keep them, which is great. Okay. But so there's one cat named Heidi, and Heidi would refuse to respond to her name, but he would, like a dozen cats would be sitting there watching TV and go, Heidi, and Heidi would ignore him, but all the other cats would turn and look at Heidi. They knew who he was talking to, but Heidi was not interested. And it's funny. It's just a good thing to think about. It increases our awareness to recognize that names have power, and given that, why not have the name that serves us, that expresses our spirit?
Yeah, that's fascinating. So for those who have a hard time with that, though, can they reach out to you for help?
Sure. This is one of the things that we do. And there are horses that I met a racehorse, and his name was Ralph, a former racehorse. And Ralph, nothing wrong with the name Ralph, but it didn't really suit him, as he had another quality. Now, I told the owners that his name was Romeo, and that was too big a stretch for them. So they continued to call him Ralph, and that's okay. But when I see him, I call him Romeo, kind of like what you did with Lady, with the horse. So yeah, our book, The Human Animal Connection, goes through this in a lot of detail, helps people understand this in more detail, and it's available on Amazon, and it's also now available as an audiobook, so people can listen to it as an audiobook. Wow. So that's really exciting.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know it was out. Yay!
Yay! And they can also call me, and we do consultations, and that's one of the things that people often are interested in, is does my animal have the right name? And I do not do this casually. I mean, sometimes I will take a couple of weeks and just really listen. And some animals, like if they need more grounded energy, they'll want a longer name, or a name with more consonants. So some animals need more yin energy, more feminine energy. They want more vowels, or a name that ends in a vowel, or different things. But there's no right or wrong name. It's just what is the name that best expresses the spirit of the animal.
I like that.
Yeah, I have a friend, and she this was all new to her, all this stuff about animal communication, but she wanted to do a communication session with her cat named Jupiter. And one of the things she wanted to know was did Jupiter, a shelter rescue, have the right name? And yes, Jupiter was very happy with this name. So
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The energy of it, right?
It's such a good feeling to know that, when you're using it so many times a day, it should evoke a sense of that being's soul or essence, and it should inspire good feelings when you say the name, and just the energy of the name, because names have energy. Yeah. How do you feel about your name? Do you like your name?
Oh, yeah, I joke about it a lot because it's pretty common. But I think it suits me.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
that's
I wouldn't do well as Romeo or Tank.
There's some dogs can have an absolutely, like Henry. There's one donkey. I forgot his name. It's terrible. I forgot his name. But he has a donkey sanctuary, I think, in Spain, and he has this beautiful white donkey named Steve, and it's the perfect name for this donkey. So it doesn't have to be a fancy name to make it a right name. It doesn't have to be a spiritual name or an exotic name. It can be Steve. For that donkey, it's perfect because he's kind of playful and goofy and dorky. And I don't mean to say that the name Steve is all those things, but it's just, it fits him. It fits him. You can see when he calls him Steve, there's love, and he feels the love in his heart when he's calling Steve, and Steve feels that he's loved by being called Steve. Having a more ordinary or common name is just what's right for him. So it doesn't mean that every dog has to have a name you can't pronounce or something, or 6 syllables or something, some Hindu name, or
Hermes Trismegistus.
Yeah, right. A Hawaiian name, Kalaniani Ole. It's like,
right.
No, it doesn't have to have that. But so it's just something to play with, it's just, this is just food for thought. And maybe your dog has the perfect name, not saying that they don't, or your cat, but it's just something to consider. It's just say, ask your animal and just listen. And when I say listen, I don't mean necessarily that you're going to hear it in that moment. Just muse on this and see what happens. And you might try another name if you get another name. And you might say, you know what? Darby's just the right name for my dog. I don't want to change my dog's name. Darby's just fine. Yeah.
Lovely. Yay.
Yay. And guess next episode, we're going to be talking about power animals and spirit guides. So,
ooh, I'm excited. I miss Ted Andrews. You remember Ted Andrews?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
He was
good.
He's been at it a long time. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll say aloha for now, and thank you for joining us at the Human Animal Connection. And feel free to get in touch with us on our website, thehumananimalconnection.org. And if you'd like a consultation, you can book one there and get in touch with us. And we'd love to see you again, hear you again, feel you again in our next podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the Human Animal Connection Show. Please visit our website, thehumananimalconnection.org. There you can sign up for our free email newsletter, book a consultation, or check out our blogs and resources. Our best-selling book, The Human Animal Connection, is available on Amazon, and your donation of any amount keeps our nonprofit organization providing life-changing services. You can reach Michael Overly, author of Let Your Dog Lead, Musings on How to Create an Exceptional Life, on his website at dogsandmen.com, or email michael@dogsandmen.com.
Let's Talk Pets, every week on demand, only on PetLifeRadio.com.